Welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 261, being recorded on July 24th, 2013. And with that, I'm Josh Walrath.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Alan Malentano.
And I'm Maury Titleman.
As you well know, Ryan is not here. He is on his fifth week of vacation this summer, or seemingly so. He's probably listening now and stabbing things.
Yes,
but anyway,
I'm sure he'll send us helpful texts along the way.
Yeah, he's with a lot of small children. They're apparently driving him nuts. But it's good for you. It builds character. You can get a hold of us at 1-888-38-PC-PER. Apparently the line is still open. We want to hear Durs, Naricon, and Nirabiter all say hi to Ryan in the nicest possible way. Or you can email us at podcast@pcper.com. You can find these podcasts at pcper.com/podcast. And if you want to follow Ryan on Twitter for whatever reason, go to twitter.com/RyanShrout or twitter.com/PCPer. This week has not been amazingly busy, but we did throw up a few pieces of content. It kind of seemed like we hit a small lull in the summer, but the way things are looking, it's going to heat up again rather quickly. So with our first review, I believe our new laptop guy talked about the MSI GT60 20D-026 US. Maury, take it away with that sexy product name.
All right. To begin with, let's start with the price on this thing. This thing is a $2,000 laptop. $2,000. It's a 15.6-inch laptop, not 17, which means you're getting a somewhere between 14 and 15-inch screen on it. It's not.
Yeah, but what's the resolution of the screen? It's 1920 by 1080.
Oh, it's 1920. Okay, I didn't see that. It's 1920 by 1080, so it makes up for it a little bit. But still, for $2,000, I'd want a 17-inch laptop because usually that also gives you the full keyboard and a numeric pad. But what you do get is you get an i7 in there. So you get the 8 cores. You get a NVIDIA 780M mobile processor with 4 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM. You get 16 gigabytes of RAM. You get an SSD, a 128 SSD, which is only a SanDisk, but it's okay, and a 1 terabyte Western Digital drive. Again, for $2,000. It would have been nice if they would have thrown a higher performance SSD in there, but we'll call that a
I don't
do
believe
get Killer Nick, which is nice.
Unless I'm incorrect.
I'm sorry.
I don't believe that it is a touchscreen. Someone was asking in the chat.
No. Okay, so there's another. For $2,000 not being a touchscreen. That's kind of odd. Because usually, and the laptops that I've seen, usually the touchscreen comes standard with the higher end laptops. Your 15-inch touchscreen laptops. Usually if you want a decent Intel processor, you start about 8, as opposed to 4 to 5 for non-touchscreen, and then your Ultrabooks and all that are touchscreen that are 11 to 14-inch or even more than that. So, $2,000 laptop, yeah, it's got a great graphics processor, it's got a great CPU, but these little things kind of make me wonder.
Someone tampered with the sticker.
Yeah.
Well, that's sitting right where you would get at the RAM and the hard drive. That's like one of the main screws to get at it.
That's kind of crazy.
Honestly, on an enthusiast level laptop, really sucks.
So what did he have to say about overall? Did he enjoy the performance? How's the build quality?
He said the performance was decent. It was within expectations. It was running up there with his main comparison was with the Lenovo Y500. It seemed to run either neck and neck or better than that one.
Hey, it's got the pretty keyboard. LED
the build
LED.
quality was good. It was a metal and plastic case, so that's a bonus. It does weigh upwards of 10 pounds, which you don't want to be lugging that around. but he did give it a gold award. It's also got the tricolor keyboard there that kind of glows in the dark, which is kind of neat. But again, it looks like it does have a full numeric and QWERTY keyboard. But if you notice on the screenshots of the keyboard itself, there's no spacing in between it. On a 17-inch notebook or 17-inch laptop, sorry, you would have some space in between the keyboard and the numeric keypad, and you would have a little more space in between the keys to make it more comfortable. Because on these super high-end machines, people tend to use them as desktop replacements, especially for $2,000. Again, I'll harp on the price, sorry. But they tend to use them as desktop replacements, and so you're going to be typing a lot on it. He does say it has chiclet keys, which tend to be a little more responsive and a little nicer to type on. But for people with larger hands, you will get cramped on a keyboard, probably, because of the layout. That's just my 2 cents. So, but he did give it a gold award. He was impressed with the keyboard, or with the laptop itself. So,
yeah, I mean it's pretty beefy in terms of mobile parts, and I think $2,000 is, it's a little high, but again it's pretty fair when you consider just an absolute crap-tacular non-gaming laptop will run you 330, and that's got really low-end integrated graphics and a low-end CPU and just the absolute bare minimums in hard drive and memory. When you're talking about a dual drive setup, one's an SSD, the other's a 1 terabyte mobile. The 4770, that's a pretty impressive chip. And what did you ever mention what kind of the battery life? I know it's got a 9-cell battery in there, so you're also paying a little extra for that. Most of the basic ones have 4 to 6 cells.
Fiddling around, he was getting almost 5 hours in sort of a normal usage scenario. So browsing, a little bit of video, not full brightness on the screen. Better part of 4 hours. Full out gaming, an hour, maybe an hour and a quarter.
Yeah, that's not terrible for
terrible.
Something as beefy.
Yeah, no. Anytime you have a laptop with a mid-range to high-end GPU in it, it's going to be, even though it is a mobile part, it is still going to be power hungry, and it's going to eat your battery. I mean,
this is
if
not a
you're
MacBook
gaming
Air.
on it,
You don't
you're going to
expect
plug it in.
8+
You're going to plug it in.
hours.
You're not going to run it on battery, most likely, unless you're kind of crazy, or unless you have an extended battery station on it or something, But just the standard battery. And I mean, I used to have a gaming laptop. I bought one because I wanted to play Crysis and WoW on the road and stuff. And it's a lot different when you're actually trying to play it versus what you think you'll get from the extended battery. So.
Yeah, and somebody else mentioned in the chat is the 780M is still really rare. And most of the laptops you're going to see that with, they're going to be in the $2,400, $2,500 plus range. I mean, when we see the Razors, their laptops go for $3,000 easy. Anyone?
Mm-hmm.
Jeremy?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'm with Maury on the price. It's just prohibitive. On the other hand, two of the things I did actually kind of like about this, that funky keyboard is actually a Steel Series keyboard, which I don't usually see on laptops. So it's, a bit of a buying point. And then the other thing is it's got 4 speakers on it. So if you really want to game and annoy people around you, hey, this is the laptop for you.
Sweet. Anyway, we can probably move along. Ryan actually had one of the very first reviews of the ASUS, let me get this right, PQ321Q 31.5-inch 4K 60 hertz tiled monitor. Now, this thing got a little bit of press lately because it's one of the first available 4K, true 31, 32-inch monitors that has the 60 hertz refresh. The Seiki versions that came out that are pretty inexpensive, they only run 4K at 30 hertz. And so why they called this a tiled monitor is how the controls actually, the video inputs actually work. So this requires either dual HDMI or one of the display ports that can handle upwards of 4K and 60 hertz. And so basically, you've got two monitors inside, even though there's no bezel that you can see in the middle or any kind of line or anything, but it controls them as essentially two separate monitors. So when you plug it into a card like NVIDIA or the AMD high-end units, it's going to either want surround or Eyefinity because it's a multi-monitor solution to the graphics card, and that's essentially just because they're forced to do that with the current connections. I'm not entirely sure what a later version of DisplayPort will do. Obviously, it will change. But 4Ks it's still a lot of pixels and a lot of power to drive them. Now, they shot a pretty hefty video about the entire thing, and it seems pretty solid, Ken, or is Ken even on?
Yeah. With the limited use, the limited time I've had with it being in and out of the office, it's awesome. It's a beautiful panel, 60 hertz. It's nice when it works. Driver support seems to be lacking. I know on NVIDIA we saw the left and the right side not being synchronized, which made a couple of games unplayable. But since it's just coming out, these tiled displays, will be interesting to see how the driver support picks up.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting that for a change, AMD has slightly better support in their drivers and their implementation than what NVIDIA does. I wouldn't expect that to last very long. NVIDIA, certainly I think that they were unhappy with how initial drivers and support came, not only just from themselves, but I'm not entirely sure what all happened behind closed doors at ASUS. But we'll be seeing more and more fixes for those quickly, especially as they are starting to become actually available. Dell had just announced their 31.5-inch or 32-inch 4K panel. It's in the same price range, so it's a $3,500 unit. So did they give you guys a shipping tag back, or do you get to keep this for an extended period?
I think I don't think we got one. No.
I
don't see any. No, but yeah.
But performance is interesting. Again, it's going to be more driver related right now, as you said. In some applications with the NVIDIA driver, you had some kind of skewing with how images were displayed, and you can imagine in doing a shooter when you've got tearing in the screen and the vertical, it's going to be rather uncomfortable. In terms of frame rating, it seemed pretty consistent with observed frames and actual, didn't it?
Well, we actually haven't been able to test this panel with frame rating. We're still working on that setup, so we went off our Seiki benchmarks, which are still applicable, even though it's a 30 hertz display. Since we don't run with VSync, you'll still see the same results on a 60 hertz panel. It'll just be smoother.
Yeah. Well, I mean, AMD doesn't have many problems with Eyefinity much, except that whole software-enabled VSync. So I'm kind of curious what that's going to show up as in frame rating. But yeah, it's a beautiful panel. And NVIDIA had released the 326.19 beta to handle the 4K monitors. Have you heard anything else from them about upcoming releases?
I haven't. I think Ryan's been going back and forth with them with driver development, trying to get something that works better than we've seen so far. Okay.
But still, it's a really interesting review that he has written. You should watch the video. He sets it all up. You can see, really, it's kind of interesting to see in real time, well, at least recorded time, the issues that they had in, like, even just booting up their system, because you're not going to see a post screen when the BIOS comes up. It's just going to be, blank screen until Windows loads, and then it starts to recognize the monitor. And that's kind of interesting how the different guys handle that. So definitely check that out. Well worth your time, especially if you're excited about where finally we're getting some nice advances in monitor technology, because as far as I'm concerned, for the past 8-9 years, it's kind of been not so much stagnant, but it has not moved further as far along as I really would have hoped. I mean, like, SIPs type quality with 120 hertz support for just inexpensive, and we still don't have that kind of technology out yet. But we're getting closer, and the 4K stuff is kind of interesting. So, Alan or Maury, any of you guys have any comments on this particular monitor?
The only thing that kind of rubs me the wrong way about that one was that NVIDIA only enables that mode just for those monitors, where it's like, it's part of their enterprise line or whatever the heck that really expensive
Quadro
line is.
Yeah, 2-panel surround is a Quadro only until right now, and it's only with these monitors that a regular GeForce will handle 4K, and in this case, 2 monitors surround.
Yeah, I just kind of hate it when they nerf something that's only nerfed in software.
Welcome to the world of professional graphics.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving along. I talked about a little bit thing that, boy, I am speaking very well tonight, and I haven't even been drinking much. NVIDIA invited me onto a call, and they wanted to talk about their new mobile Kepler architecture that will be in the ultra-mobile space. Now, we've known Logan for a while, and we knew that there would be an upgrade in the graphics technology. We just weren't sure about all the details. Well, now we know a whole lot more. They will be using Kepler for Logan, and Logan, again, is going to be assumed, Tegra 5, unless they decide to drop the Tegra name and go with something different. It's going to be their next generation of ARM-based processor. And if we kind of look back at what NVIDIA has done with mobile graphics in the ARM space, it really honestly has not been all that impressive. The original Tegra was pretty basic. The Tegra 2, there was a lot of hype surrounding it, but it just didn't perform as well as other products in the marketplace, and guys like Qualcomm, who had their Crate architecture, had significantly faster CPU performance and graphics that were almost as good as what NVIDIA offered. If you remember that first, we didn't know a whole lot about that first GPU, but it turned out to be essentially kind of a GeForce 7800, 7900 GTX type architecture. It had 4 pixel shaders and it had 4 vertex shaders. It was not a unified product. And when Tegra 3 came out, they doubled the pixel shaders, so there's 8 of those and still 4 vertex shaders. So they increased performance. And, of course, they brought a chip that had 4 cores plus the 1 spare core. So it was an improvement. But, again, when we compared it to what else was available in the market, and especially with Qualcomm, who had 28-nanometer products at that time that were faster, sucked less juice, and, again, performed almost as good in graphics applications, NVIDIA just didn't get a whole lot of traction with Tegra 3 until Microsoft Surface came and utilized their Surface RT. But unfortunately, we all kind of know how well that particular product went, and perhaps in the end that did not help NVIDIA as much as they were hoping. But now they're finally kind of getting back to the roots, it seems, that they're really going to try to push the graphics, and I think really that is the only way they're going to be able to make any waves in the ARM market, because everybody else is either licensing the ISA from ARM or they're licensing specific cores, and so there's not a whole lot of differentiation. And NVIDIA is finally figuring this out, and Kepler will be coming to the ARM market, and this is a good thing because it's a 192 CUDA core, so it's a unified shader architecture. They don't tell us anything about ROPS or memory bandwidth, but we're assuming it's a 4 or 8 unit ROP. Well, it's going to be a single ROP partition anyway. We have no idea on texture, but we can kind of look at other SMX units and figure those numbers out there. But what the biggest push is that the previous GeForce cores in Tegra, they were not OpenGL ES 3.0 compliant. They didn't support OpenCL, and they didn't support CUDA at all. And so these were just purely graphics processors that were built into these ARM products. And as we're moving ahead, PowerVR 6 series, the Mali 600 group from ARM, these are all OpenCL 1.1 and 1.2 compliant, OpenGL ES 3.0, and they will actually do some GPU work in the future. So NVIDIA had some catching up to do. And Kepler not only takes them up to where these other guys are, it kind of goes a little bit past because it's fully DirectX 11 compliant. So it can be used in other Surface type applications if that's what Microsoft wants to do. And it supports up to CUDA 5.0. So it's a modern graphics processor from NVIDIA, and it's being put in ARM. And not only that, but it pulls, I think, they were showing demos that the chip was doing 2 watts. And the complexity it was able to achieve was pretty impressive. They have 2 YouTube videos up. One with Ian. Is that the? Yeah, that's the one with the very advanced face and subsurface scattering and all these, very shader dependent things. And the other one is the Islands demo, which again is it handles a lot of tessellation, pretty advanced shaders, and it's a nice looking thing. And that's one thing that Kepler has is the ability to tessellate. And these other Mali PowerVR chips, I do not believe that they feature a tessellation unit. So it's good that NVIDIA is finally kind of seeing where things are going and figuring out that the only way they can really differentiate these products is by having a much better graphics technology and a very robust software side that they can actually sell to these large phone and tablet makers. So it'll go as low as around 2 watts for the entire thing. And they expect it, from anywhere from 4 to 8 watts in a tablet type architecture. We don't know what Logan is going to be running in terms of Cortex. We assume the Cortex A15. We don't know core counts. We don't know if they're going to go big little or if they're going to do the 4+1 again. These are all good questions that we have. But the good thing for NVIDIA is that they have gotten chips back from the fab. They work, and they work well enough that they're actually shipping samples to their partners to see how it works and if they would be interested in actually implementing these in their products. And again, taking a look at these videos, and there are videos of them videoing the tablets mock-ups that Logan is actually running, and they run very, very well. So check those out. We'll see if NVIDIA actually does anything this time, and if they have any problems with manufacturing as they have in the past. Any of the other guys have any interest in this whatsoever? Jeremy?
Well, I'm so into phones right now that I just can't get away from them. But it's nice to see mobile hardware that's actually going to be compliant with the stuff that we use on a desktop. That's sort of what I took away from this is, hey, all of this compatibility that they're adding in, we'll see if it's up around, what was it, a GT 8800 for performance they were talking about?
Yeah, the old GTX 8800 in I think, pure raw performance.
So it'd be interesting to see, but we'll see if this means that you can now play a game on your PC and immediately pick it up on your phone while you're waiting for the bus.
An 8800 drew a heck of a lot more than 2 watts.
Yeah, it was
yes, it did.
225 watt graphics card.
So that's kind of impressive.
We've that's a pretty significant shrink in both die size and power consumption, because that was 128 shader core product, and now we're what 192, and those were DX10 shaders back then. Now these are full DX11, so the complexity is far greater right now. But moving along, Alan, I hear your sinuses hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we need to get on to some news and need to get you into a shower. Scrub you on
Yeah.
down. You're going to have a Hollywood shower, not like one of those damn submarine ones where you wet down,
Wow, you
lather up.
actually said Hollywood shower, and we do use that term on the sub. Nice
I
one.
know you do. How about that?
So I was in Seoul last week, allowing my head cold plenty of time to get worse. And at Seoul, they were covering. Actually, I was at this press conference while you guys were recording. So you guys were doing that at night, and it was like early in the morning for me, which is kind of weird, but all right. So what is it? Last week you guys only talked about the very first news post I put up, I believe, right?
Yeah, just
We
the
done.
teaser that you put up.
Yeah, it was like a quick teaser. Hey, they announced, okay, it's an 840, Evo or whatnot, that sort of thing. Okay. So during that press conference, they went through some more detail there. So I wrote up a couple more news posts, and we're actually going to have a review coming up. Probably by the time you're listening to this, there should be a full review of a couple of samples of this drive. That would be a 500 gig and a 1 terabyte model, actually, in case you're curious. But for now, all I can talk about is what came out at the press conference. So here's the deal. There's the original 840 series. So I'm talking 840, not the 840 Pro, right? You had the 840 series that was triple level cell. Then you had the 840 Pro that was multi-level cell and had some improved specs because when it did writes, it wasn't trying to zero in on, 1 out of 8 states for voltages, which is how triple level cell works. Well, this new model is basically another triple level cell model. It's on a smaller process. It's on 19 nanometer flash instead of, I think, 22 from the 840. So they shrunk it, but it's not a huge shrink. It's like just kind of like a half step, I guess you want to call it. It was just enough to get them into 1x nanometer. It almost seemed like it was just their, news department that was trying to get them to just shrink it enough to get there so they could use that as their little tagline, I guess. But nevertheless, it is smaller. The controller's a little bit faster. They doubled the cache, the actual RAM cache memory that it uses. And they just, made some firmware tweaks and whatnot. But the largest of the firmware tweaks, and I think is the coolest firmware tweak, is what allows them to run a small portion of each die as single-level cell. So you have like the flash dies that are distributed out throughout the packages, and they're all throughout the SSD. And each die has this tiny little section on it, which varies depending on the size of the capacity of the solid-state drive as a whole, just the size that you buy. And so just take, for example, the 1 terabyte model. It has 12 gig worth of cache. That's SLC. So when it writes to that, it's able to write really quickly. It doesn't have to zero in on any specific voltage. It's just like, hey, this is either 1 or 0, that sort of thing. And when it reads it back pretty darn quick too. So what it's able to do with that is the first 12 gig that you write to it at full speed will be at the full speed of the SLC section. And then whenever you stop writing it, or whenever there's any kind of pause, it'll immediately take that stuff and start dumping it off to the TLC in the background. And then, so it's basically just like similar to a cache, like a RAM cache on a RAID card, as far as how it functions. What this cache does for you is the smallest capacity, the 120 gig model, will write, and now granted that cache is smaller, it's only like 3 gig. But for the first 3 gig you write to the 120 gig model, it will write at 410 meg per second, which pretty much smokes the old model, which was 130 meg per second all the time, right? Now, granted, the speed does fall off once you fill up the cache all the way, but if you think of typical use, even if you did like a Windows install or something like that was doing a bunch of writing to the drive, chances are it's not going to write a continuous 3 gig at 410 meg per second, right? So anytime there's any kind of gaps, it's continuously trying to flush that cache back out to the rest of the drive. So for most of the time, for most use cases, it's going to run at that higher speed. And for every other capacity of the drive, that's 250 gig all the way up to 1 terabyte, it's 520 meg per second write speed. For the size of that cache. So that's pretty cool the way they did that. And as far as in testing, I can't get specific numbers, but it looks really good. That's what I can say so far. And then the second piece that we covered was when they announced their pricing. And this is one of those cases where, just like every other SSD pricing announcement, we cross our fingers and hope that they actually sell for this. But the base model is 120 gigs, supposed to be like $110, and it basically runs under $1 a gig. The sweet spot looks sort of like between the 250 and 500 gig, which is 190 and 370 respectively, and then it goes all the way up to 1 terabyte at $650. So that's 65
Money
cents a
well
gig.
spent.
Yeah, 65 cents
Oh,
a
yeah.
gig for something like that. Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Well,
Yeah.
we'll see. I mean, didn't OCZ originally was saying something? I mean, it wasn't that cheap, but it was cheaper than $1 a gig, and we've yet to see that come to fruition.
Right, that's the thing. But I will say this, OCZ drives tend to be a lot more starved on supply than Samsung drives. Right? Samsung ships a huge amount of solid-state drives. So I'm hoping that, I mean, really, if they can stick anywhere close to this, you're talking, if they can maintain, even if the 1 terabyte settled out at like $800, people are still going to buy that thing if they want a terabyte of solid-state, because that's just simply the cheapest thing going.
Well, even if they can approach that price at sale, even on sale prices, they'll decimate the lower end SSD manufacturers like Kingston and AData and who has SanDisk that tends to sell the cheaper ones.
Right.
I mean, they'll raise the bar on performance and force those other guys to beef them up a bit, maybe.
And as
Well,
far as scaling down in the future, I think that Samsung might be able to easily make much larger than a 1 terabyte, because when I cracked open the 1 terabyte model, there's only 8 chips in there, and they're mounted on a 1.8 inch style PCB. So it's barely taking up the whole space inside of 2.5 inch SSD. So if they were to make a 16 chip, they could potentially make a 2 terabyte model right now if they wanted to fit it in a 2.5 inch form factor.
That's kind of nuts. One thing that's kind of helping the other guys is, one, like the SanDisk 2 series is just dirt cheap to buy as chips. And 2, SATA 6 is only so fast.
That's true, and that's some of the other stuff that they were talking about during that conference, although none of it is actually things that are available yet. But they were just speaking to some of the stuff that they couldn't specifically go into the whole, the SSDs that we've seen in Apple products. They kind of danced around that. But they did speak to the NVMe, or the PC, or what is it? Yeah, NVMe interface, which is basically, you can have an SSD that's PCIe connected, but it still has all the regular overhead for serial ATA type I/O, right? It has command queuing and, all the regular limitations. Like command queuing is limited to queue depth of 32, stuff like that. When you get into NVMe, it has like insane level of queue depth, like 65,000, queue depth. That's how deep the queue can go. And then it can have multiple like virtual devices, each one having a 65K queue. So when you see how SSDs scale, like if you look at any of our reviews and you look at the IO meter portion of it, you'll see that every given SSD will ramp up, and then it sort of levels out once it gets at 32 for the queue depth. And the reason is because most of them they can't go beyond 32 for the queue depth. This will enable much, much higher queue depth and much, much lower latencies, like extremely low, like 1/10 the latency per IO. When you get into using that different kind of interface. Because the best you can hope for with standard PCI, connected SSDs is going to use the protocol similar to what RAID cards use, which is like SCSI port or store port. And as good as store port is, it's only so good. There's still overhead there. It was still designed around not flash-based memory. It was designed around hard drives where, you were expecting there to be a bunch of latency anyway per IO.
I think it's actually kind of fascinating that we're at a point where the drives are actually well past the performance of the interface. I mean, if you look back at Ultra DMA, ATA 33, ATA 66, ATA 100, 133, these things were really optimistic interfaces at the time because nothing could get anywhere, a modern an ATA 133 drive at the time that was really fast was maybe 60 megabytes per second of throughput.
Oh,
And now
that.
we've got these drives that are just saturating SATA 6 and could easily go further.
Oh yeah, they could. I mean, Ken can speak to the 800 meg per sec for the PCIe SSD that's in his MacBook.
Yeah, an ultra thin with 700 plus megabytes a second of throughput.
Yeah, I don't know what it's gonna do with like where it's getting stuff to
iTunes
put on it
launches
that
really
fast.
fast.
Yeah,
Really fast.
It's because Steve wanted it that way. They have a special Ouija board, boardroom, the Ouija boardroom.
the Ouija board room. That's awesome.
they still communicate with Steve. He wants a fast I/O subsystem, and he got it. But anyway, moving along. Fascinating stuff. Alan may be leaving us to go and relieve some head pressure from his sinuses, so we may or may not see him later on. Thank you, Alan, for your contributions to this week's podcast. But Jeremy, tell us about AMD. I heard they didn't lose a copious amount of money this time.
No, they thankfully lost less than we were expecting, but still a net loss of 74 million is a net loss of 74 million. On the other hand, 1.16 billion revenue for AMD in what is really a difficult time for PC sales is not bad. Not bad at all, really. AMD, because of the restructuring, essentially has two groups. The Computing Solutions Group, which will be the ones that sell you the CPUs, and the Graphics and Visual Solutions Group, which you're never going to be able to guess what they do. So actually, it turned out that the Computing Solutions Group actually saw revenue increase from last quarter by about 12%, which is not horrible because it's right now really hard to sell the CPU because everyone likes these fancy new phones. On the other hand, if you compare this to last year, they're looking at about 20% less sales, which is in line with a lot of what we've been seeing with a lot of manufacturers. And while Intel can still manage to make a profit, they did still see a decline. The bad news came more from the graphics and visual side, where they saw a loss both ways. So compared to last quarter, a drop of 5%, a drop of 13% when you compare it to this quarter last year. Now, a lot of that is something that we can probably think of as the price wars. Sure, they're selling more GPUs than they were, but at the same time, they had to slash the prices so deeply that, the profit margin is a little bit slimmer, and so this next generation has to come in at what are higher prices than we've been expecting or seeing from AMD recently. Sort of the same with the CPU side, at least for one particular 5 gigahertz CPU that we've mentioned a couple of times before. But on the other hand, a lot of the CPU sales are picking up, and it's a lot because of the notebook sales, because honestly, if you're looking at an AMD processor, you're looking at a low-cost notebook where you don't even have to fork over for a GPU because the one on the processor is good enough for you. So overall, not great news for AMD, but better news than we were sort of expecting, and it's going to be an interesting future for them because this isn't going to shake stockholders' belief in AMD. They knew this was coming, and in fact, they did perform a little bit better than was expected by the street for the most part. So we'll see if Rory Reid and his new AMD can start actually getting out of the red and into the black.
Yeah, they're supposed to see pretty significant increase in sales over the next quarter, and they're pretty pleased about where they're at. I think Rory, I wasn't entirely sure about the guy when he first came in. I thought he was a lot of talk, and then they started slashing the workforce, and I wasn't entirely sure if that was the correct thing for them to do. Because they did get rid of a lot of people and a lot of engineering people. I think that they were something like 11,500 before he came, and now they're slightly under 10,000. I think it's like 9,800 people work at AMD. And but I think what he's doing is working. Certainly, they've become a much more focused company. I think that when Drew and others were there and Hector, that they started acting a lot bigger than they actually were, and in ways that kind of slowed down innovation, production, product releases, because they wanted more layers of management to make these decisions and design changes to go through. And so it slowed down the entire process. And I think that Rory got rid of a lot of people that, maybe didn't perform as well, maybe hindered things just because, I don't know, maybe they just required more paperwork. But in
Well, and
terms
we're
of,
aiming for bigger than AMD could really do.
say that again.
They were aiming for a little bit higher than AMD can reasonably put out right now.
Yeah, possibly. So yeah, it's a lot more focused. They're really pushing into the mobile hard. Their Jaguar-based cores. Go ahead.
The consoles, we haven't seen any money yet, but it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how a lot of that's going to work. I don't know if AMD is going to be selling some guys certain chips, or if it's all just going to be royalties. My gut feeling is that Sony and Microsoft will be actually handling the orders with TSMC. They just had AMD design the product. They pay a royalty per chip, so it's not AMD actually selling these chips to these guys. But still, they get paid a flat amount for the actual design of the chip from these guys, and then after they finish the design, hand it off to the manufacturers. Then they get the royalty. So everything's kind of paid for.
Well, it certainly works for ARM.
Yeah, it does. And so they're going more heavy into licensing, and it seems like that they're really starting to push where their expertise actually really lies. So mobile CPUs mobile APUs are doing well. They're starting to get a presence in tablets. It's going to be a while before we see them in cell phones. It's not going to happen anytime soon. But certainly, tablets is an area that they want to be. They see that as a big growth area. They're going to take a hit on margins, but at least they're selling things for a profit. And, a product shipping millions a quarter is never a bad thing. So it's nice to see AMD actually making some headway and maybe stay afloat for the next couple of years.
We hope so.
Yeah. Maury, tell us about the Cooler Master unveils a massive V8 GTS CPU cooler. Since you're kind of the cooling guy.
Sorry, Josh. The cooler itself, if you look at some of the pictures with the LEDs and all, it kind of reminds me of a Decepticon, for lack of a better comparison. It is a really neat looking cooler. It's got the red LEDs inbuilt, which is always a nice thing. I like chrome and black and red coloration. That's one of my personal favorite. I don't really like the blue and black. That a lot of people or the orange, but we'll get that later. The one thing that kind of concerns me with the design of this is the way that they have the two aluminum heat dissipation units on the ends. If you notice, they're actually in a vertical orientation, so that the heat pipes not vertical, horizontal, where the heat pipes come up and the heat pipes come up vertically off of the CPU block and then go horizontally into the radiator, into the air cooler. The way these heat pipes normally work is that there's some fluid in there that vaporizes at temperatures that the CPU is going to get up to, and then they condense back into liquid via the air cooling in the radiator portion and go back to the CPU and kind of do a liquid exchange like that. With that kind of orientation, and assuming that heatsink is going to be on its side, because that's how most motherboards sit in cases, I don't know if that's going to work against it or not. Because most of these very large coolers like this thing, the heat pipes are oriented straight up and down from the CPU plate. So, that may work. That may actually work against the cooling efficiency of this unit, because you're going to theoretically you could get that vaporized liquid trapped in the straight portion of the of the heat pipe itself, because the way that it's all based on gravity and
Convection.
the lightness of the heat. The hotter stuff's going to rise up the heat pipe, and the colder stuff's going to
Convection.
going to float. Yeah. I don't know. It is cool looking, but it is also heavy. I think Tim said it was 1.9 pounds, so it's almost 2 pounds. It's probably the radiator fins. The radiator fin design is probably aluminum, because aluminum tends to dissipate heat better. The heat pipes themselves and the base are probably solid copper, or probably nickel coated copper, because copper tends to suck heat up better. So that's why they usually use copper and aluminum hybrid, because aluminum doesn't suck it up as good, but aluminum gives it up better, and copper tends to suck it up better, but doesn't give it up as quickly. So
Dissipation versus conduction.
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting design, but it just the kind of the way that it's laid out seems odd to me, because of the orientation that you're going to have this cooler in. You may have hot spots in the heat pipes themselves, but I don't know. But it looks cool.
Sweet.
And it's got two 140 millimeter fans on it too, so it's going to move some major air through it.
Major air.
Major air.
Hey Ken, what do you know about the Intel PCN, aka NUC?
Nuck.
Because you had no problems whatsoever with the NUC after you
None.
really did a lot of heavy I/O with it, right?
Yeah, exactly. What I'm confused about is they told us this was fixed at CES and gave us a new one, the retail shipping one. Said, "Hey, it's all fixed." And then I just read this a couple minutes ago, and apparently there are still overheating issues with the NUC. And
Well,
yeah,
now we
It's
see
shocking. So now I love it, because they're dumping the heat into the SSD.
yeah, I don't know what I don't know what's going on. I didn't read that far into this.
because
get it.
more heat spread anywhere spreads everywhere,
Yeah,
and I think that's okay. All they do is put a thermal sponge in there.
Yep.
is
I
it
don't
sponge
get it.
worthy?
It apparently is quite sponge-worthy. So yeah, it seems that they finally addressed that after about 6 months worth of time. Kind of strange. Jeremy, AMD announces several new gaming evolved titles, and I think, isn't there something in there that kind of caught your eye?
Oh, there's certainly one game in there that's catching my eye. They left it to the very end of the list. Thief. The brand new Thief will be part of the new Gaming Evolved bundles. So this is going to be interesting. The other ones, I mean, some old titles you might recognize, like Castlevania, Final Fantasy, Leisure Suit Larry, all things that we played back in our formative years. Murdered Soul Suspect, Pirate 101, and Shadows of the Eternals, I'm not quite so sure about. But, it's nice to see that AMD is continuing to push new games into this Gaming Evolved program, because it's really nice to see AMD keep pushing out new optimizations for new games, because we're seeing, as I mentioned previously, not perhaps the best return on investment for making new GPUs. But the way it's meant to be played is NVIDIA's. This is AMD's, and it's going to be interesting to see if we get some new bundles going, if we get a little bit better performance, if we get a beta driver for frame rating. It should be interesting. Oh, and by the way, Thief.
I've never even played. Okay, I loaded up the third Thief once and played like 5 minutes of it. Was it any good? Deadly Shadows?
Third one, I actually never finished. I only played a little bit of it. It was the original two that were just fun.
Yeah, the first one was. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Like in the
unique.
pants.
It was really the
It
first
was.
time they did that.
the first-person sneaker.
Yep.
NVIDIA, if there wasn't enough news from, do we only ever really talk about AMD, NVIDIA, Intel, and Samsung on these podcasts? Maybe Zalman, Cooler Master.
Cooler Master occasionally.
Just
ASUS once in a while.
Corsair. We haven't talked about Corsair today. Anyway, NVIDIA. They're going to be releasing Shield. It's about a month later than they expected with the original pre-order, and it's only going to cost $299. I believe that somebody in this group, not here present, might be playing with the Shield and figuring things out about it for a potential NDA date that, since they're going to release it July 31st, my birthday, obviously they're going to be sending me quite a few of them. I guess not. Anyway, $299. That's cheaper than I expected because it's got a pretty high definition 7. Was it 5-inch or 7-inch?
5-inch. 5-inch 720p.
Yeah, and it's touch. It's got good battery life. It's got the Tegra 4 that we were talking about earlier. And it seems like a neat little unit. It's got a lot of features. It's Android-based, obviously. I guess the proof is going to be in the pudding when we finally see it in action, and I'll certainly be looking forward to not only hearing about it, but probably at Quakecon, I'll get to play with one, or maybe two, because there's nothing more fun than twiddling things. Anyway. NVIDIA launches, we're talking about them again, the biggest and baddest Quadro K6000. Jeremy, do you want to take this one since I was doing titillating jokes?
Oh, well, now you can do them in high definition with a workstation class graphics card.
Yes.
Hey, it's nice to see yet a new Quadro come out. The K6000 is going to be based on ye old GK110, as far as I remember, and is, of course, the successor to the Quadro 6000, which we've been seeing for a little while now.
Now, how many stream units, CUDA cores, does this monstrosity have?
Oh, it's only got 2,880 of them.
So it is a fully functional GK110, one of the mythical beasts.
That was never going to hit the market, but yet suddenly did. At we only know what price. It's going to be impressive. But the numbers on this, even compared to the previous generation, are just incredible. Like, as you pointed out, unheard of CUDA cores before. This is fully activated. 5.2 teraflops single precision computation as opposed to 2.2 from the previous card. And a mere 12 gigs of memory on the card, which, is just going to be obscene for people that actually need this level of performance if you're in the video processing or game rendering. Memory bandwidth is up a little bit. It's at 288 gigabits a second or gigabytes a second as opposed to 173. And it's also going to take a little bit more power to run. You're looking at 225 watts, which is almost but not quite double the 122 of the previous generation. So it's going to need some cooling.
Yeah, but that's still the same power area as a GTX 780. True. And so 220 and 250 is the Titan, I think. Yeah, it's a dual 8-pin. So it's not out of control.
Oh, no, it's not out of control. It's just significantly noticeable compared to the previous generation.
Yeah, one of the smaller ones. True.
And this also sort of shows something we're seeing from NVIDIA, which is they're looking more at moving into industry, like, for instance, oil exploration. They're looking at getting into medical applications, supercomputer that they've been trying to break into for a while. But with this generation, compared to the competition, I could really see this taking off as long as it's, affordable at a corporate level. It's not going to be affordable at a personal level unless you make more than the four of us combined.
Yeah, it's going to be pricey. And you got to figure a fully functional chip at that TDP And we don't know what the clock speeds are, but I mean, they're not going to be bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's probably like one of these chips per wafer. So think of how many thousands of wafers NVIDIA's done with these chips, and how many of these stinking cards are actually going to be available. I mean, they're going to be pricey. Pricey. K6000. Anyway, moving along. Guess what? We get to talk about Intel. Shocking. The Intel Atom C2000 processor, which I believe is based on the Silvermont Bay Trail, and then their 14 nanometer server CPUs, which are going to be Broadwell. And yeah, they're going to be kind of aggressive going into these lower power, high density servers. The C200, 64-bit, second generation Atom. And my child is swinging on a bar behind me, and he needs to stop that. Ty, stop.
But in the
Children.
meantime, Rangeley is going to be interesting because that's headed straight to network devices. So the old switches, the old, hey, we're going to buy an antivirus company and start putting the antivirus on the silicon. This could well be what we see as the start of it.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like Intel kind of fell asleep for a while because they're beating AMD into the ground, and then mobile really started coming out. Low-power servers started to become more and more in vogue, and finally, they're getting to where they're starting to release some pretty interesting products, but this is still a little ways away. I'm still not entirely convinced 14 nanometer is going to be as available as they're hoping. I think it'll be fine, but they were hoping, I think, at the end of this year, and it's going to be later than that.
And
Go
it
ahead,
won't be
Jeremy.
called Atom.
No, but the 22 nanometer Atoms, they've been needed for a while, and certainly that's going to be late Q3 this year.
Yeah.
So it's going to be good to see. And again, more competition is better. It'll help ARM out because they'll innovate more. AMD will innovate more, and Intel will keep doing what they do, which is just kind of get fat and lazy, and then go on a crash diet and exercise course and release some really interesting things. So, moving further than that, Haswell to reach 4.5 watts SDP in limited quantities. What the heck is SDP?
Well, that's scenario dissipated power. That's we're going to design a scenario in which we can make the TDP look much lower than it actually will be, and then sell that as the TDP.
So, 4.5 watts, that's, it depends on what they're running and how hot it'll get. But still, 4.5 watts for Haswell.
Yeah, I mean, it'll
Josh,
probably end up being about 910 TDP, I would expect.
Go ahead, Maury.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, speak.
Oh, I was going to say, isn't this SDP number that Intel's coming up with, isn't that similar to what NVIDIA was claiming with their low power? I mean, it was the same type of playing with the wattage numbers with NVIDIA's low power tablet chip.
I think what you're actually thinking of is some years back, AMD had a typical dissipated power or something like that, that in traditional ways would be like a 95 watt TDP, but they said under these typical workloads it would be a 70 to 75 watt, and so they kind of shifted all those numbers down, and that was not very popular with a lot of manufacturers because oftentimes they would go above that typical power, and it would not do well with the chassis or cooling solution. So it's going to be interesting to see how Intel handles this one in software and low-level BIOS optimizations. We'll see. Boy, we've just gone on, and Ryan isn't even here. He's probably listening in, and he's grinding and gnashing his teeth. He's thinking about brimstone. He's dressing in sackcloth because we've ruined everything.
As long as you'd rather watch us than hang out with small children, we aren't doing too badly.
Well, it's true. I mean, there is a certain level where you cannot go past, and small children on vacation can be one of them. But anyway, Next week, we're going to have our PC Perspective Hardware Workshop at Quakecon. That is going to be, what, Saturday or Friday?
Saturday.
Saturday.
Be Saturday at 12:30 to 2:30 or 3, I believe.
Yeah, sometime
it's
about
it's
that.
about a half hour to an hour earlier than normal, or than the past few years, that is. But
Yeah.
it'll be in the same. I believe it's in the same room. It's in the main stage room, which is the Chantilly Ballroom, I believe. Yeah, it'll be a good time. There's a lot of prizes that are already. The page that you can see there has the prize list that's ever growing. He has a pretty good set of prizes so far. There still are some that are TBD. They will be filled in as we get closer to the event. We still have a week and some change.
Yeah, AMD is giving away 3 HD 7990s. That's $1,000 card, and they're actually releasing a driver July 31st, which will help the frame pacing on that particular model, at least with a single monitor. Maybe not so much with Eyefinity, but hey, like I would say no to $1,000 card no matter what.
Is a 7990 $1,000 card, Josh? I thought that they were cheaper than that.
It might be a little cheaper, but not a whole much.
Not by much.
Okay.
So it's a lot of good prizes. Ryan, of course, does a fantastic job in communicating with all these companies and getting them to give to you guys, the gamers, the people who show up. It's some nice publicity, and you guys get to walk away with some pretty nice hardware. So that'll be a lot of fun. Show up, and also on July 31st, the day of my birth, as well as the podcast that we will be producing at QuakeCon. You're more than welcome to join us. We'll be in a kind of conference room. We'll have everything set up. We'll be doing the podcast from there, and we will hope to have a couple of people in the audience and maybe get them to talk a little bit and ask questions and interact during the event. So you're more than welcome to come. Just keep a lookout for us on July 31st in the Hilton Anatole.
Now, one thing to mention about that, July 31st, typically with QuakeCon, July 30 or the Wednesday before QuakeCon is an early admittance day. Usually what they'll do is people get in line, and I'll be one of the unwashed masses in line. They get in line to get early admission into the BYOC to actually, basically you can get into the BYOC, dump your stuff, and that's it. It's not guaranteed. There's no set time for that. It's basically when the volunteers finish, say, okay, we're good. And it also gives them practice for when the main onslaught happens Thursday morning. That may affect the time of the podcast. So just, as Josh was saying, stay tuned in, for because we're not totally sure when it will be on Wednesday. As far as it's last I've heard, at least. And that's what you've heard also, Josh, or?
I don't know anything. Nobody tells me
Okay.
anything other than I got small insects running around my house, otherwise known as children. Anyway, if you wanted more information on the PC Perspective Hardware Workshop, you go to pcper.com/workshop. You'll see an updated list of prizes. You'll have more information about the events, as well as potentially, if you can show up and say hi to us on the podcast, just as long as you dress nicely, have good hygiene, and don't say too many words while I'm talking.
Or slip them the tongue.
Nasty. Hardware software picks of the week. Ryan's not here. He doesn't get one. So that leaves you, Jeremy.
Well, I have an admission to make. I'm assuming that this will reach. This was my reward for 15 long years at work. I am now an Apple owner.
The hell is that?
That is a Nano, apparently.
Huh.
I think it can be taken internally. You just swallow
That's
it and you've
disgusting.
got music around with you forever.
Oh,
Does it have a suppository with it too?
Well, there's always ways.
well, congratulations on being employed for that long.
Yeah, well, there
Oh,
is that.
hey.
But on the other hand, also not a huge Zelda fan, but did run across a mod today for Total War that just utterly blew me away. They've actually taken medieval Total War 2 and done a complete Hyrule mod. This is insane, and I am more than a little impressed. So for all of you Link fans out there, give it a shot.
Huh. Interesting.
It's impressive.
I still have never played Zelda. I remember seeing it when I was...
Not even like the NES one?
No. I mean, I watched my cousin play it once for about 5 minutes, and he was just moving around and hitting stuff and getting hearts, and I was just like, dude, what's that? Wait, what's that? And
Yeah, I never did play the Aubergine of Time or whatever it was, which is apparently good, but hey, there are fans.
Okay, my pick of the week. I've done a significant amount of testing in the past couple of weeks on video cards, and one that kind of stuck out with me is the old HD 7950. These things can be had for $249, 3 gigs of memory, and what's nice about them is you can overclock them pretty extensively, and they will run very, 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 very fast. And again, they're cheap. They're about the same price as the GTX 760 at stock speeds. They're very comparable cards, but again, you can overclock this quite a bit, and the 3 gigs of memory is a nice added bonus. Not to mention the 384-bit memory bus versus the 256 on the GTX 760. So, Alan, he wants somebody to dig out his sinuses. That's his pick of the week. No pun intended.
That's what those wet dry vacs are for.
Yeah, pretty much. Poor guy. But anyway, Maury, tell us what you got.
I've got thermal paste. I've got a lot of thermal paste. I've been since I've started testing the Haswells, I've been on a trek to figure out why my custom built water cooling system is, or the one I use on my test bench, at least not my main system. That's a whole different story. But the one on my test bench, why my custom cooling system can't quite keep up with the Haswells. In doing that, I kind of went crazy with thermal paste, checking different ones, trying to figure out if maybe the generic paste that I use, because I usually use, for years, I've been using the MG Chemical 85, whatever, what is this stuff? It's the 860, 60 gram stuff, this stuff right here.
No, those are your suppositories.
It's touted as being,
no, that's what Alan was putting up his nose before, isn't it?
Yes.
Touted as being, some of the best on the market. But I figured, okay, well, maybe that's it. So I kind of played with some different thermal paste, and I came up, I found this IC Diamond stuff. It actually works very well. What it is, it's basically got diamond powder in it, 24 karat diamond powder in it, and it works very well at heat dissipation. Very well. 5-6 C difference under load, which is nice. The one challenge with it, though, is that it is thick. If you've ever used Shinichi, the G751 Shinichi paste, it's thick like that, where, it actually comes out, it's not creamy like peanut butter like most thermal paste is, but it's actually thick more like silly putty. So you kind of have to play with it. You don't want to touch it with your hands, because that screws it up because of the oil on your hands. But you kind of have to play with it and kind of spread it as best you can on the surface of the CPU or the GPU, whatever you're going to put it on, and then let gravity and the pressure of the hold down clamp, between the hold down clamp and the surface of the CPU and the tension from the hold down clamp on the cooler itself work its way through to spread the stuff out. It does have some curing time, but it works. Out of all the paste I tested, and I tested, let's see here, as I said, I tested the MG Chemical stuff. I bought some Ceramic 2, which is kind of older stuff. I bought the Arctic MX4. Let's see, I have the IC Diamond. I also bought some Arctic Silver 5. Out of all of them, the IC Diamond stuff seemed to work the best. I
it's
don't. I
not
didn't
creamy.
use any Shinichi because I didn't have any left. I had a bunch, and it just kind of went real quick because I had some. Believe it or not, Intel used to package Shinichi with its coolers. That was a few years back, but yeah, no, this diamond stuff it's decent paste and it's not that expensive. Considering how much thermal paste goes for decent thermal paste, you can get a 1.5 gram tube of it for about $5. If you want the 4 gram tube, I think it's maybe 15 or 20. So it's really, I mean, that seems kind of expensive, but it's not expensive for higher end paste.
Because, lab-grown diamonds are actually kind of cheap anymore. So, yeah. 24
And
karat
theoretically
diamonds.
effective.
Murray.
Yeah, I think
What?
24 karat, I don't know, something like that. You can read. I mean, you can read about it in links, but it is good. It does live up to its marketing hype.
Nice.
Better
All
than
right,
normal.
that's our podcast for today. Thanks for everyone for listening in and for your patience. I realize it was not smooth nor creamy, but we do our best as we can without Fearless Leader involved in our daily lives. So get a hold of us at 188-38-PC-PER or podcast at PCPer.com. Again, you can find these at PCPer.com/podcast on the web. Listen to it. Enjoy it. Try not to make fun of us too much. But anyway, we appreciate your time. And with that, I'm Josh Walrath.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
Now I'm Maury Titleman.
Hey, Ken, say goodbye.
And that black hole
Bye.
is Alan's
Bye,
sinuses.
Ken. Yeah, Alan did not do
Bye.
so good.